of this piece of legislation, and just to break through some of the ridiculous rhetoric we've been getting from the other side of the House, because this bill is not about choice. I should listen to Roger Douglas because he got me in here. Another stellar interjection from David Bennett, the chair of the Select Committee here. And I want to thank the submitters on the Select Committee. They're lucky that they made it past David Bennett because he stops people submitting at our Select Committee. So we were lucky that some submitters managed to make it past the guard dog who doesn't like people coming along to submit against government legislation. But the fact is, this isn't about choice. And it just shows how out of touch the ACT Party and the National Party are when they say that this is about choice. Because there is no choice for a family who is living on the breadline, because their wages have stalled, because the cost of living has gone up, because this government, which promised that they would not increase GST when they were asked during the election campaign, increased GST in October this year. All their costs have gone up. They are struggling to get by. And the National and the ACT Party would seriously have us believe that those people have a choice when it comes to whether or not they trade in a week's holiday. You know what real choice is? Ask them whether they'd rather have a pay increase and be able to live on their salary. Live on their salary. And I guarantee that every single one of them would say that's what we would like to be able to do. Because it's not a choice. It's not a choice when someone who is desperate, who is having to make cutbacks in their family, who maybe can't afford to send their kid on a school trip because they just don't have the money left at the end of the week, it's not a choice to choose between time with their family, time to regenerate, time to make sure they can be a more productive worker, which is why we have annual leave. It's why it's there, because it helps productivity, it helps workers to be rested, it helps that they've got time to spend with their families and they don't feel like that they're neglecting them or not able to spend that time with them. It is not a choice to say to them, instead of a pay increase, we're just going to give you the option of cashing up a week's leave, even though we know you don't have a choice about this, because it's a choice between paying the bills and not paying the bills. Because saying that's a choice is like saying that a family that gets evicted because they can't pay the rent chose not to pay the rent. Or a family that can't afford to buy their kid new shoes chose not to buy their kid new shoes. It ignores the reality, which is at the nub of this, which is that too many New Zealanders now are struggling, and this government is doing absolutely nothing except passing ridiculous pieces of legislation like this, which do absolutely nothing to address the core problems facing many New Zealand families. And this is a government that said they would be family-friendly. Well, how is it family-friendly to view annual leave only in terms of the dollar cost of it and not in terms of the value that it provides to the worker, to their families and to the employer when they have a more productive worker? That's right, it's just a commodity to the National Party, and it's very telling that they only view it in terms of that dollar value. And we see this again when we talk about the changes to sick leave. Because if an employer has reason to believe that someone is rorting sick leave provisions now, they can demand a medical certificate. They can. But the flip side of that is they have to actually have reason to believe that someone's rorting it. How is that unfair? How is it unfair to say that employers should actually have reason to believe and be able to show some evidence? For example, someone takes consistent Fridays and Mondays off, or the boss sees them on the TV at the rugby. Of course they should be able to demand a medical certificate to prove that. But what this government is saying is that anyone can be made just to provide a medical certificate if they're sick for one day, even if it's a cold or flu. Even though, as they know, all the research in New Zealand shows, one, there is no problem with this. Our workers in New Zealand take less sick leave on average than most other countries. And number two, the biggest cost to government from lost productivity or cost to government overall is not the cost of sick leave and how much workers are taking, but the loss of productivity because workers are coming to work sick. That's the biggest cost to employers in New Zealand. And the government knows that because they've been told that time and time again. That's what the studies show. Workers, even Treasury is saying that. The biggest cost is when workers are coming to work, and if they're told, well, you have to get a medical certificate if you're going to take a day off sick, they are going to come to work. They are going to come to work because they can't do that. They probably can't get into a doctor. They probably can't afford to go to a doctor. Especially if they know the doctor's only going to say it's cold or flu, so just go home and rest. Why would they waste money on their ever-increasing doctors' fees under this government, getting a medical certificate that tells them, or going to a doctor who's just going to tell them you shouldn't have bothered coming to the doctor?